Welcome back, everybody, to our next to last video. And we're going to look at, now that you have these volunteers trained and they're at work and they have supervision, what challenges might come up and what evaluations do we need to do? You do often encounter volunteers who are challenging to work for. I just realized the title of the slide, Challenging Volunteers, could mean that you are giving them challenges. No, the intent is that they are challenging to the supervisor. And when that happens, when there's a problem with a volunteer, how does it need to be handled? Well, the three important things are to take care of the person. This is an individual. They did not come in here with the intention of causing you trouble or of failing. And I've never yet known anybody who got up in the morning and said, I wonder what I can mess up today. No, they came with good intentions and something isn't working. So you need to honor their needs, what they're there for, and then offer them support rather than just control. Like, you did this and we really don't do that here. We want you to do this, is not going to be helpful. You have to assume they didn't want to mess up. So if you've been supervising volunteers for a while, you've probably met at least one who is difficult or challenging. Or even as a volunteer, you may have seen a situation where a volunteer was very difficult and was presenting a challenge. If you can think about this situation and be ready to share it when we meet, we can learn from each other. Now, what was the issue? And if you were the supervisor, how did you approach dealing with it? And what support systems did you need in order to do this in a way that was effective? And you may, as you look back on it, think, oh, I could have handled that better. And that's okay. That's how we learn. I always get amused when people see a list of Proverbs or a book of Proverbs, and the Bible even has a book of Proverbs in it. Those are all things that people learn the hard way. So don't think that when you learn that way that you're any different from the rest of humanity. So when you have challenges, on page 27 in your workbook is some really good information about how do you productively confront somebody when they're not meeting expectations for whatever reason. And as you think about a situation you've encountered, how many of these pointers have helped you and how might you use them again in the future? And I think everybody who's supervised volunteers for any time at all has run into situations like that. I will add here, just parenthetically, sometimes a situation can't be worked out. Yes, you can fire a volunteer. And if it just isn't working, it's not a fit and it's detrimental to the organization or the clients, you may need to hire someone. But this is a very unusual thing and we don't want it to happen unless it's absolutely necessary. Then we need to do performance evaluations on our volunteers. Why do we do that? Well, to help them meet to reach their potential and to help your organization involve them better. Generally speaking, it's important to tell volunteers that there'll be some meetings to mutually discuss their progress, or that they will be getting a survey at a certain time. And it's important to be pretty consistent on that, because let's say there are 3 volunteers working in a particular area, and the supervisor is a little concerned about one of them, so calls them in for a conversation, and the other 2 don't get called in for conversations. They're going to notice. Does that mean that that volunteer was misbehaving, or they were extra good, or what's going on there? So there needs to be a system and a pattern that people can depend on. And then at any time, SurveyMonkey is your friend. You can do a satisfaction survey and send it out to the volunteers to see how things are going. You can give them a tool of self-assessment. How do they think they're doing? This is a good way to lead up to a conversation with them. As they leave the volunteer position, exit interviews are extremely important, and they're too often not conducted, or they're ignored, or somebody forgets to do them. You learn so much from people as they're leaving because they feel free to say exactly what they're thinking. And far better to have an exit interview where they tell you something that's been bothering them for 3 months than to leave without a chance to tell you, and they're going to tell 6 friends what bothered them about volunteering in your organization. And the check-ins we mentioned at regular intervals. And for some positions, you might want some sort of performance measurement. It's unusual, to be honest. For most times it's an informal thing, but there are some sorts of jobs that you may very well almost grade them, give them a measurement with a score so they know where they stand. The check-ins are probably the best part of supervision and the most important part. They're generally held with the person who supervised them, logically enough. They may be held with you plus their supervisor, if that seems an appropriate way to go, so you know what's going on in the program. When you have a volunteer check-in, it's important that you state its purpose and why you're doing it. And it always has to be shaped by the goals of the position and the duties assigned. You can't supervise somebody by saying, "I'm sorry, you haven't met the expectations that were in the back of my mind." They have to know what the expectations are, which are the goals of the position, and then they're evaluated according to those goals and to what they were assigned to do. And if those check-ins are conducted well in a way that is supportive and open and not accusatory, they can be very helpful. Among the things you might learn from them is that somebody has never quite understood how they were supposed to do some small part of the job. Or you may find that they started out loving this job. They could now do it in their sleep, and they'd love something a little more challenging or a few more responsibilities. And they might not have ever said so if they hadn't had this chance to check in with you. It's also possible that they might think they're supposed to leave. Now, that sounds weird, but if the position description says duration minimum of 3 months, and they've come up on 3 months, they might wonder if, oh, I guess they want me to leave after 3 months, when actually that was the minimum. And assuming they're doing a good job, you certainly hope they stay, but you may have to tell them that. It might not be that obvious to them that that's what's going on. Then you not only evaluate volunteers, but your program needs to be evaluated. And that is hard. There's no other way to put it, because you can't count and measure the successful components of a volunteer position or volunteer program. You have to really look at, how are you going to evaluate it? Is it going to be partly on volunteer retention? Is it going to be on volunteer satisfaction? Is it going to be on something you measured that the volunteer program did for the organization and its clients? Whatever it is you're evaluating, you need some data, figure out a way to collect it and analyze it and interpret it, and then it needs to go in the annual report. And if the volunteer program evaluation isn't going in the annual report, it should, and that's something that you might campaign for. But I once had somebody who is an expert in HR tell me that volunteer management is the black hole of data collection. And in some ways, that person was right. We don't often take time to stop and collect data, and we do need to do it. There, as I mentioned earlier, some things that we tend to do really well, as in supervising, unpaid colleagues, but data collection is something we need to work on. And there are some tools, including there's a steps to effective evaluation outcomes worksheet in your workbook on page 29. It's a really good tool, and one that can, I think, help you put together a report for the annual report about why do you have volunteers anyway? What have they accomplished? What can you point to say, look what we've done, look what we have accomplished here. And one word of warning, don't just limit it to the number of hours served by volunteers. It's an important statistic, and volunteer time is now valued at almost $30 an hour, given what it would cost to pay somebody to do that job, plus the supervision and background that goes into that. But that's only part of it. So what? What did they accomplish? What difference did they make for your organization?